Welcome to the Earth Keepers Summit. I'm Dr. Alberto Villoldo, and today I'd like to share with you an ancient shamanic practice. A shamanic practice that you can use in your daily life. Before I became a shaman or medical anthropologist, I directed a small brain laboratory at San Francisco State University. In the biology department, I was surrounded by 200 different brains inside of jars filled with formaldehyde. It was a very difficult lab to work in because it smelled terribly. We had the windows open, even in the middle of winter. And my fascination at that time was the brain. How did the brain create disease, psychosomatic disease, and how did it create health? After a few years of researching how we could create psychosomatic health, I decided that we couldn't. That basically the mind, unless it was trained, only created disease. So I went to the Amazon to work with the jungle medicine men and women and learned their practices of using the mind to create beauty and to create health, and discovered that the mind can heal you or it can kill you. In the Amazon, I discovered that ceremonies were an essential part of daily life. You had the biological ceremonies when you went through your rites of passage into manhood or into womanhood, the birth rites, the rites of passage into becoming an older person, into menopause, and then, of course, the great death rites. And I was fascinated, why do we have ritual and ceremony in every culture in the world? And that's because the brain needs ceremony in order to change. It needs to go through a wedding ceremony so you can realize that you're not a solo individual person any longer. You're part of a system now that includes a partner and includes children and includes an expanded family. Without rites of passage or ceremonies, the ancient brain will not allow us to change. It doesn't matter how many years you spend in therapy. It doesn't matter how much you talk about your childhood issues or the trauma that you have experienced. The only way to heal trauma and to create a more interesting journey in your life is to go through a ceremony where you acknowledge that you are stepping into your new being, into who you are becoming, and you're no longer defined by your age or by your status or by your trauma, by what happened to you in early life. You're now being defined by your possibilities and by who you can become. The beginning of a new chapter in your life story. And that new chapter allows you, in effect, to write a new and more meaningful story for you in your life. Now, particularly with trauma, we know that trauma is stored in the energy field and it's informing the body as it tries to work its way out through the body, whether it be through an illness or whether it be through an engagement in the world with someone that will help you heal. This is what happens, of course, when we fall in love. The very first time we fall in love, we recognize someone that can help us go through our own personal healing. And then we discover a little bit later that they're not the person we thought they were. What happens at the beginning is that you find someone and you go, oh, I love you just like you are. And then after a couple of years, when they don't meet your expectations, it becomes, I love you just like I am. Because of course we, early in life, will project our own unhealed parts out into the world. And we end up marrying it frequently. Because we haven't gone through the rite of passage. We haven't gone through a ceremony to shed that old story. And for shamans, for the earth keepers of old, trauma is not what actually happened to you, but the story that you create around a painful event. It's not the actual event. There are no traumatic events. Traumatic events don't exist. They're traumatic experiences. So what for one person can be a terrible trauma, for someone else can be simply something that happened and a learning opportunity. So when we go through ceremony, we're able to write a more creative and original story about ourselves and about our lives. We no longer continue to be the child of alcoholic parents or the product of birth trauma or this terrible thing, the terrible experience that we had at the age of 6 or 8. We're now the product of the future, of who we are becoming, of what our possibilities are. But the ancient brain, we call this the limbic brain that we share with all the mammals. It's a brain that has 4 programs, which are fear. It lives in fear. It's activated by fear. Feeding, scarcity. We don't have enough in our lives. We don't have enough time, enough money, enough love, enough of everything. Fear, feeding, fighting. These are known as the 4 F's. Fighting, aggression. We look at the stranger as the enemy. We project our own unhealed parts out into the world, and we end up running into them. Fear, fighting, fear, feeding, fighting, and fornication. Predatory sexuality. Your sexuality becomes your currency. It's what you have to offer the world or you need to conquer through. So we want to break free of the grip of that ancient brain, and we cannot do it unless we do ceremony. I'm going to share with you perhaps the most ancient of the shamanic ceremonies, which is the fire ceremony. Remember that we have sat around the fire for 1,000,000 years. Around the fire we told stories, we made love, we helped our loved ones to die, we delivered babies. We spent 1,000,000 years around the fire. It's programmed into our DNA. So the fire ceremony is the most ancient of ceremonies that the shamans have around the world. So today I want to share with you a ceremony that you can use to heal those ancient wounds that you've been carrying with you for so long. And we do it by putting it in the fire. But there are 3 steps to it. The first step is shedding that wound, that story, putting that story in the fire. The second step is practicing forgiveness, forgiving everyone that was involved in that story. That person that hurt you, that person that did not protect you, that person that was the aggressor, that in some way violated you. We want to put them in the fire, and we want to forgive them. And then the third step, which is the most difficult one, is we want to come to the place of gratitude, of practicing gratitude. And we do it all in the fire ceremony. Gratitude, of course, is what liberates you, what sets you free. Because even in step number 2, when we practice forgiveness, it's still in some way keeping you trapped in the story that says that someone did something to you and you were a victim. So we want to free ourselves from the place of the victim, come into gratitude, where we can learn the lesson, the teaching that the universe was offering to us at that time. And of course, vow to never ever have to learn that way again. Because once we learn the lesson, once we receive the teaching, we don't have to keep repeating the grade. We don't have to try to continue to fix it through the next lover or the next person we meet. Not too long ago, a friend of mine invited me to celebrate his wedding ceremony. And he was very happy he met the love of his life, except that this was his 5th wedding. And I said, no, I'm not going to marry you. In fact, I think that it's really important for you to stop looking for the right partner and start working on becoming the right partner. And he got very upset with me, uninvited me. And many months later, he called me and he said, "Why did you let me do it?" Of course, he was trying to heal it through the next lover, through the next boss, through the next city. We stop projecting our unhealed parts onto the world, and then we can bump into beauty and creativity and originality and not into suffering, So how do we do the fire ceremony? Well, the very first step is to have a fire, of course. You can do this with a great big roaring fire in the summertime, or you can do it with a candle like we're going to be doing together today. So the very first thing that we do is to call on the four directions. We have done this in an earlier video. Call on the protectors. These are the great archetypes, the great power animals that protect you and create a very safe and sacred space. You call on the serpent in the south, on the jaguar in the west, and the hummingbird or the owl or whatever bird is local to you in the north, and on the eagle or the condor in the east. And then Mother Earth, Father Sky, and within this sacred space, and review that first video if you need to, you are able to do your sacred ceremony. Remember, ceremony brings you into contact and into relationship with the sacred, and it becomes a sacred rite of passage that helps you to transition from an old story that's no longer functional or workable into a new and more creative story. Now, today, humanity needs a new and more creative story. We have to put the old story of humanity into the fire. That old story that says that humans own nature, that we own all the food in the planet, that forests are for making lumber and making ships and what we call natural resources. That's not natural resources, it's nature. We need a story of stewardship of the earth, of becoming earth keepers. But we'll get to that a little bit later, how we can put together into the fire this ancient story of humanity, of the predator human, and become the earth keepers, the stewards of the garden. So what I'd like you to do is to take a moment and take a couple of deep breaths and to find a story that you want to release to the fire. Maybe it's the story of someone that left you, or maybe the story of someone that abandoned you, or perhaps the story of someone that hurt you in some way, or maybe the way that your children have been behaving badly towards you, or maybe something that you feel really guilty about, that you did wrong. These are the stories that keep us bound to being a victim, and we want to set them free, release them to the fire so we can embark on the story of the hero, of facing extraordinary odds and succeeding and being victorious. So find that story that you're ready to place into the fire, and then I'd like you to get a small stick. It can be a small toothpick. I like to use these little hibachi sticks. Or you can even use a piece of paper that you roll up very tightly. And then the next step is I would like you to blow 3 breaths, 3 times into the stick, whatever story it is that you're ready to let go of today. Now remember that we're engaging sacred forces. We're engaging forces outside of ourselves. Psychology says that you need to muster your own power within. And that's very good, very important. But the shamans understand that there are also the powers without, the powers outside of your being. that psychology doesn't recognize, but that we know we're in constant relationship with. You want to summon the assistance of the spirit world, of the mother, of Gaia, Pachamama, of the spirits, of the Great Spirit, to be present and to help you to make a transition into a new and more creative and more beautiful story. So I'd like you to blow that trauma or that story that you have outgrown but is still kind of lingering in your life, blow it into the stick. 3 times. And a 3rd time. And now bring it to the fire. And say at this time, I release you, I set you free, I release you. Oh, I set you free. I no longer need to learn this way. I release you. And now as you're holding the fire, I'd like you to say to yourself and to the people that were involved in the story, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you for having hurt me, for having disappointed me. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And when the fire is out, at that point, we're going to go into the 3rd step, which is gratitude, the practice of gratitude. Thank you. Thank you to the cosmos, to the Great Spirit, to the universe for teaching me. And to receive that lesson that the universe offered you. And when you're ready to receive that lesson, that teaching, I want you to pass your hands through the fire and to bring the fire first to your heart center. I received that teaching. Thank you, Great Spirit. Thank you, Mother. I received that lesson. Thank you for the lesson. Bring it to your heart center, to the place of the Munai, of the deep love, which is the very fabric of creation itself, is love, is Munai. And feel that fire going into every cell in your body, renewing and potentiating and empowering you, every cell in your body. And now pass your hands through the fire once again and bring it to your forehead. Thank you, Mother. Thank you, Great Spirit. Thank you for this wonderful teaching you've offered to me, no matter how painful it was. Thank you. I accept it. I receive it. Sometimes the teaching is to help you understand what suffering is so that you can have compassion for others that are suffering. Pass your hands through the fire again. And now bring it to your belly. That you find the power and the medicine, that you turn the poison into medicine that was being offered to you by life. This is your power center. In the East they call it the Hara, the Tantien, the place of the Chi, of the Ki, of the power, of the medicine that will allow you to write a more original story in your life that is driven by love and by vision, that is vision driven. So again, these are the 3 steps. The first one is to blow 3 times. Use the breath, the power of the breath. Remember that in the beginning there was the breath. There was the Word, and the Word was God. The breath was spirit. In fact, the word spirit comes from inspiration. Inspire. Spirit is the breath. The breath is, and when you release your last breath, you expire. So use the breath to blow into that stick, and I'd like you to tap into a feeling, an emotion that you had. I know when I've gone through my own healing frequently, what I discover is shame. And when you release this to the fire, you heal the shame or the anger or the fear. And shame in particular, for us Westerners, is a very important emotion that we need to heal. Remember that way in the beginning of our story of creation, when we lived in paradise, Adam and Eve were in paradise, and then they tasted the fruit of knowledge offered to them by the serpent. And that was the job of the serpent, by the way. The serpent was the protector of that ancient tree of wisdom, and her job was to offer the fruit of wisdom to the woman, because the man was too busy doing things. And the woman received it and shared it with Adam. And then their eyes were opened. And then God comes into the garden, and he cannot find Adam or Eve, and says, "Where are you?" And he sees that they're hiding behind the bushes. And God asks, "Why are you hiding?" And Adam responds, "Because we are ashamed." Because we are ashamed. That's the very first emotion that all of us Westerners feel. It's in our story of origin, because we are ashamed. Shame doesn't mean that you did something bad. That's guilt. Shame means that you are bad, that you're not a good person, that you're not a good human being, that you're not worthy, that you don't deserve. So very, very deep in the deepest layers of the stories of our wounding and of our trauma is the sense that we're not good, that we're not good human beings. And curiously, we Westerners are the only people in the world to have ever been kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Nobody else was. The Buddhists weren't, the Sub-Saharan Africans weren't, the Native Americans weren't. They were given the garden to be the stewards and the caretakers of the garden. But we were kicked out. We don't belong anymore because we felt shame. So we need to heal that ancient story. That's another story that lives in our body, in our field, in our cells. That shame that we feel that we're not good, because we are good. We are holy, sacred beings. And this is ultimately the gift, the teaching that you receive in step number 3. So let's review it again together. Blowing that story and that feeling, that emotion, and see if you can track down deeply enough to discover that shame, that place of shame that lives within each and every one of us Westerners. And then releasing it to the fire, holding it to the fire. I release you. I set you free. I set that story free. I no longer need that story in my life. And as it's burning, then you go into the second step, which is forgiveness. I forgive you, all of you people, that you who betrayed me, or you who hurt me, or you who were not there for me. I forgive you. I release you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And then, with step number 3, it's the practice of gratitude. And you do that as you pass your hands through the fire. Thank you, Great Spirit. Thank you for teaching me this lesson. You don't have to thank the people that hurt you. You have to thank the universe for offering you the wisdom, the teaching that you're able to draw out of that traumatic experience. You're able to turn poison into medicine, into nectar, into wisdom. Ah, what an empowering journey. Ah, bringing it to your heart center. Whoop. Without setting your house on fire, bringing it to your heart center. And receiving the Munai, the love that the Mother and the Great Spirit have for you, our cosmic parents. Oh, yes. Gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then taking the power, the great power that has been set free, the power of fire, into your belly. And then the fire into your forehead, that it open your eyes to the wisdom available to you in the cosmos. And then you set free the four guardians, the serpent, the jaguar, the hummingbird, the eagle. You thank Mother Earth and the heavens, and you have completed your healing ceremony. If you are a healer or a practitioner, bring it into your practice. You can make a big bonfire like the shamans do in some parts of the world, but today burning wood is very unsustainable. So you can do it with a small candle in your office, in your healing center. Do it with your children. Help them shed that story of shame and of being wounded and of not belonging that they have inherited unconsciously, simply by being born into our society. So we can become empowered. So we know that we belong. So we know that we came here to this planet with a holy and sacred mission, which is to dream together a new world into being. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining the Earth Keeper Summit.